Hello guys and welcome to HJW Gaming. Following the release of Rise to War 2.0, everyone has been busy testing and trying to find the best commanders for their formation. So in this video I'm going to be running through the 3 tier 3 good side commanders that I think you should find space for in your army. I really hope you enjoy. So first up on this list, we're going to be heading to west of the Misty Mountains in order to take a look at our first tier 3 commander, which is Gilgad. Now Gilgad is someone who'll be very familiar with everyone from Rise to War Classic, as he was one of the most popular commanders that out there and probably had the longest running stint at the top of the meta of any commander in the Classic game. The reason he was so powerful was because of his very strong damage avoidance through his evasion skill. It almost completely changed the Rise to War Classic meta, with people having to shift to pursuit items, normally accessories such as Tactical Mark or Hunter's Mark, and also increased the popularity of commanders like Gimli, who had weapons which contained pursuit in their unique toolbox. In Rise to War 2.0, I actually think Gilgad could be almost as strong. The reason for this is his evade skill still remains with Kingly Kin. So with Kingly Kin, when 10 skill points are allocated, you get a 70% chance to evade all damage on your elven units during the first 2 rounds, and that extends to 3 formations within your army. So other elven troops within your army on other commanders can also evade damage. So he still has that extremely powerful evade. The difference now, however, is that Pursuit has been removed from the 2.0 items, and with a lot of people exchanging their classic gear and changing it into 2.0 gear without the availability to shift back, Pursuit is going to be a lot less available. And there's a lot less skills as well that also contain Pursuit. So therefore I think Gilgad as a result still has one of the strongest damage mitigations in the game. On top of that, he's also gained a Changed Respect 3 skill with Alliance Leader. Previously he had the White Council skill tree, but with Alliance Leader he gets another instance of very strong damage mitigation, but also a great ability to increase his own damage as well. So what Alliance Leader gives you is when you deal damage, your next instance of damage will then be increased by 20%. And on top of that, once you get 5 skill points into this skill, that effect is modified by Gilgad's attack stat, so can go beyond that 20%. And as I said, you get good damage mitigation as well, as with 10 skill points, you get additional damage mitigation of 15% after you deal damage. So this is a very, very strong skill for both boosting your attack and also reducing the damage you will take. Lastly, within his skill toolbox, we have the High King skill, which is very similar to, again, his classic Respect 5 skill. What High King gives you is some fantastic troop support. So on top of the damage mitigation we had previously from Kingly Kin, High King more focuses on increasing the damage of your allied and current formation as well. So what this does is increases damage and defense for elven units within the first 3 rounds. Once you allocate 5 skill points, you additionally get +5 attack for all elven units within Gilgad's formation. And if you allocate 10 skill points, you can increase that up to 4 formations. So if you're using an all-elven army, you can ensure the attack and defense boost applies to every formation within your army. His unique item, Aglos, it's decent without being exceptional. It increases his command, so again it will give some good support to his own troops, as well as giving you good unit attack and defense. The commander attack won't really do a huge amount other than maybe increase the amount of benefit you get from his Respect 3 skill, and similarly the buff you get on it, Blessing of High King. It's okay. If you're going to be using elves, you get a tiny amount of healing, and as we know, healing is pretty broken in a bad way in 2.0, so I don't think 5% here was going to make much of a difference. So you're more looking at the stats at the top, and whilst they're okay and they will increase him, it's by no means one of the strongest Respect 10 items, so don't worry too much if you have to miss out on this one. For commanders that synergise well with Elrond, you're basically looking for any commander that can use elven units well. The first one that springs to mind is of course Elrond, who similarly is a very strong elven unit troop buffer due to skills such as Villiers Ringbearer, giving them follow-up, and also Half Elven, giving them more strong attack and defense buffs, along with his Power of Bloodlines, which increases the attack and defense of elven units. So these two in combination can cause massive damage when used with elven units. If you're looking to use an elven army, I would definitely recommend including Gilgalad within your formations because of his support is just second to none. That excellent evasion along with the damage boosts makes him pretty much essential for any troop support army. For the second commander on this list, we are going to head down to the Misty Mountains and take a look at Gandalf the White. Now, whilst I currently don't have him at Respect 5, I have been giving him a good bit of testing, and he is a fantastic commander for good side. Again, he is one of a number of, on the good side, great troop supports. Primarily, this focuses around his Respect 5 skill, White Rider, which when maximised gives 25% damage received debuff during the first 3 rounds to 2 enemy formations, which is fantastic because if you give this debuff to, say, I don't know, the enemy's frontline or commander-in-chief, and then that gets targeted and hit by your chief damage dealer, be that a unit or commander damage, that 25% bonus is going to make a massive difference. So you're going to deal a huge amount of damage. On top of that, when you put 5 skill points in, the duration increases from 3 rounds to 4, and when you put 10 skill points, that then targets 3 formations. So the chance of your high damage units or commanders hitting that damage debuff on the enemy is massively increased. So if you're using Gandalf the White, make sure to maximise this Respect 5 skill, because that amount of additional damage, 25% additional damage, is huge when you consider the output you can get from some commanders in particular. Additionally, he does have other great skills within his toolbox. We'll talk about White Council as well. Obviously, this was a very, very strong skill in PBE, the first iteration of PBE, with multiple commanders having it and being able to stack all 4 commanders having it for massive damage avoidance. Thankfully, that's been nerfed with now only the 2 Gandalfs having this skill, but it is still a fantastic skill individually on its own, with the ability to get a huge amount of damage avoidance on all 4 of your formations within your army. 18% reduction during the first 7 hits when maximised. That is a huge amount of damage, particularly in the early rounds, which we all know are the most important rounds within the battle. His other 2 skills aren't too bad either. We have Wizard, which we can talk through, and if you wanted to kind of turn Gandalf the White into a bit more of a hybrid and use a mix of these skills, this skill can be good for dealing focus damage as well as providing some support. So what this skill does is deals focus damage once to 1 or 2 enemy formations. With 5 skill points allocated, it causes the target's defense to reduce by 10. And with 10 skill points, you'll deal an additional 5% focus damage for 1 round. In my opinion, this is probably the weakest skill within Gandalf the White's toolbox if you're looking to use him for troop support. But of course, make sure you use this skill if you're trying to use him for focus damage. And we also have the White as well, which will be his primary focus damage skill. This activates on every 2nd round due to the 1 round cooldown, and will deal up to 450% focus damage to 1 enemy formation. With 5 skill points, you gain additional 5 focus, and with 10 skill points, you also gain a 25% chance to stun the target, so you get a little bit of crowd control in there as well. In my opinion, he should be run as a support commander using a mix of the Respect 5 and Respect 3 skills, and then you can kind of allocate your skill points where you want. I'd probably put them into Wizard with anything I had left over. But yeah, overall he can be a fantastic commander, primarily due to that additional damage resistance from White Council, but also White Rider massively increasing the damage of other commanders that you choose to use him with. As far as good combinations with him go, you really can't go wrong, as he pretty much matches with every other commander, as you know, flat damage reduction and flat damage increase will synergize with every single commander in the game. So I can't recommend a specific support, as he is the support basically. Of course, you can never go wrong with pairing him with some of the best DD commanders, as that 25% damage increase if hit by one of the DD commander's main damage skills will massively increase that damage and could swing a battle in your favour. So if you're looking for a specific kind of thing to support with him, I'd recommend using him in a DD commander formation. There's a good range of commanders that kind of fit this description. Beorn is one of the kind of leading commanders at the minute that we're not seeing too often, but his skill set looks like he will have fantastic damage. Aragorn, King of Men, is another DD commander that can deal massive amounts of damage. I've seen some fantastic reports from my fellowship with people using him, and he's kind of good for a mix of support and DD damage, so will pair well with Gandalf the White. And another commander that will pair well with Gandalf the White is located in the Eastern region, and no one will be surprised to see me recommending as my third and probably the best good side commander at the moment is Dane Ironfur. Dane Ironfur is probably the best commander at the minute. As we know, DD commanders are the absolute meta at the moment, and nobody does this better than Dane Ironfur. He has basically a toolbox just stuffed full of high damage skills that activate throughout the battle, so you'll be looking at enormous damage all the way through. So don't be afraid to pump him up to high levels of respect, as those skill points will not go to waste. First up, we have the King Under the Mountain skill, which deals an enormous amount of physical damage, which is 160% to 3 enemy formations with only a 1 round cooldown, so it activates every second round. On top of that, if you pump it up to the 5th level, you get physical damage deals 10% through enemy defense, basically, or ignores enemy defense. So if you come up against enemy tanks, you will just cut through a lot of that defense and deal additional damage. And on top of that, if that wasn't enough, when you allocate 10 skill points, your next instance of damage will do 10%. Make sure to take this skill first, as the activation order is important with Dane Ironfur, as you want to take this skill before you take the next one, which is Durin's Blood. Now, people will be familiar with Durin's Blood in, of course, Rise to War Classic, and it's not really very different here. Essentially, it deals an enormous amount of physical damage, so 700% here, to 1 to 2 enemy formations with a 2-round cooldown, so it activates every 3rd round. In addition, you get plus 10% skill damage for 3 rounds after this hits, and of course this will increase other skills when you'll see how many other damage skills there are. This is a pretty big deal. And also with level 10 you get plus 5 attack, so that physical damage will scale upwards with attack. The reason we want to take King Under the Mountain before Durin's Blood is if we want to try and get that synergy when these activate on round 6, so you get that plus 10% damage, which hits just as that 700% hits. So if you can get that plus 10% and this 700% hits 2 enemy formations, you'll be dealing a ridiculous amount of damage, over 1500% damage scaling with your attack, which is one of the things that makes Dane Ironfur so ridiculous. Once you've fully maximised this skill, I would recommend going into his top Respect 0 skill, which is Ironfoot. Now this is just, again, yet another physical damage skill, with you getting an additional 45% per level you put into this of physical damage to 1 enemy formation, again activating every 2nd round. Now you want to take this after the first 2 skills in your skill allocation order, as you want this to activate after Durin's Blood, because you don't want this to take that plus 10% you get from King Under the Mountain. If you can get it up to 5 respect points, you can also gain a good chance to stun the target. And if you have exceptionally high amount of skill points, you can also inflict a HP recovery debuff on the opposition. But primarily we're here just to keep taking those additional damage skills and get as much damage into Dane as possible. Frankly, some of the reports of him are ridiculous. With him leveled up, he will consistently output over 100k damage. With his gear, I almost wouldn't worry too much about getting sets as such. Of course, if you can get the best in slot gear for him in a good set, so I think in War Cry, for example, would be very strong, as it would help those first 3 rounds. But I wouldn't worry too much about trying to get a set. Instead, I'd maximise that damage and attack stat, which can involve actually running some classic Rise to War 1.0 gear. I'll show you what I mean by looking at my Dane Ironfur. The best in slot for him is the 2.0 Axe of Khazad-dûm. Reason being, the more refinement you get, the higher you can push Dane Ironfur's damage through the primary refinement stat, but you also gain good attack through the stats, the attack stat given by the item. This is similar for the accessory as well, where accessories are capable of granting bonus damage, and also you get additional attack through the Palantir of Orthanc. So again, this is best in slot. However, for the chest piece and helm, you actually have a little bit of a selection of what you want to choose. For example, I've chosen to use the classic Superior Hauberk. The reason for this is that it grants bonus commander attack, so I'm looking to increase Dane's attack as much as possible to get that maximum physical damage from his skills and from his normal attack. Now in this case, 1.0 gear actually scales favourably compared to 2.0 gear. If I compare it to a Superior Hauberk from 2.0, you'll notice there's no bonus attack here, so the only thing I'm realistically losing out on is the 1200 commander HP. So it's whether you want to maximise Dane's survivability or his damage, and in my opinion, damage is key here. Similarly with helms, the buffs on helms all give bonus HP, they don't give bonus damage. So you could choose to instead use a 1.0 headpiece if you have one that can grant high attack, though in this case I do think the Cask of Pride is best in slot as the plus 48 attack is massive. But if you do not have that as an option, the Rise to War Classic 1.0 full helm with melee vigour is an excellent alternative, as it provides, with its buff, 6% reduction to damage to your melee units if you use those on Dane, but it also grants 45 attack, so it's very close to the Cask of Pride's attack stat. Of course, you don't get that bonus HP or the commander defense, which is only a small increase. But of course it only requires purple gear to increase, you don't have to use gold gear, so actually it can be a very cheap but very strong alternative. Dane's Relic used to be one of the best relics around, but in my opinion now it's not as strong as it used to be. Contains some useful stats, it increases attack by a further 6, so you'll get more damage, as well as giving him more HP. However, the buff itself, Relentless Vigour, has been nerfed pretty significantly. Without heavy refinement, you're only getting 0.5% now bonus damage per stack. Stack up to 5 times, but 2.5% bonus damage. Not an enormous amount, so don't worry too much if you don't want to pick up this helm. Only really pick it up if you can afford to massively strengthen and refine this. As far as support goes, I've kind of already mentioned he pairs very well with commanders like Gandalf the White, for example. However, Dane on his own, I'd recommend just dropping into almost any formation that you have on the good side, because his damage output is pretty much second to none. So I would just drag and drop him into almost any formation. I would definitely recommend picking him up for your army. And with that, that's everything I have to offer. Of course, I could have mentioned a few other commanders. I didn't give a full run through of Elrond, Beorn and King of Men I mentioned, and I didn't even mention Isildur at all, who is another top tier 3. But hopefully you guys found this video useful. I'm sure I'll cover those again in the future. If you have enjoyed this and found it useful, please smash the like button, and if you want to see more Rise to War 2.0 content from me, please hit the subscribe button to get notifications of when I upload. And with that, I really hope to see you on the next one.